Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Talkoffamepod podcast. I'm Kylie. Today, we're talking to Andrew Rowe, who's an energy healer, spiritual mentor, and coach, in which his mission is to guide you on your journey back to your authentic self by helping you release limiting beliefs or keeping you stuck in your false self. Andrew and I are going to discuss living your authentic self, using your energy to create a dream life, his experience with being addicted to drugs, to healing people, and much more. I'm super inspired by Andrew's story and how far he came with his journey from being addicted to drugs and healing people. Me and I were just talking about it before we got started, and he's just so amazing. I'm super excited for you guys to hear this conversation. And thank you so much for coming on, Andrew. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So, I know we kind of covered me and you this a little bit earlier, but like, when did you gotta get into like your spiritual journey?
Yeah, so the spiritual journey kind of took place, you know, for a while. I mean, we're all on one. And I think that's what we have to remember
Mhm.
is that we're actually all on our own spiritual journey, but we're just not aware of it. But for me, when it really started to take form was when I had the drug psychosis when I was at university linked to ketamine, but it was mirrored with a spiritual awakening. And I started to kind of hear voices, see auras, and I didn't have a space that was grounded and supporting of it. So I immediately believed that it was somehow bad, right? I grew up with Catholicism, Christianity, and I really was in this idea that either it's good or bad, and there's no in between, there's no spectrum. And so I started thinking that I was evil. And so obviously, that was pretty horrible. And I had really just two options was either kill myself or do I just, use my power of my will to realize that I'm not and that I am light. And so I chose that and went on this journey with yoga, cards, retreats, all that kind of stuff. And then during lockdown, I slipped my disc while I was meditating, letting go of anger and jealousy, which is wild. But again, it was such an indicator of the power of energy. And started doing different modalities because I had this time off work and I realized I was quite good at it. And then, yeah, March 2021, I set up my business and we're in 2023. And yeah, I have a pretty successful business and I'm helping a lot of people change their lives and remember that they're love at core. And that's that's
Mm.
that's my journey, like literally summarized in about 3 minutes.
Yeah, that's so amazing. Like these, my mom and my sister are basically into those type of things. So I was growing up, I was never kind of into spirituality besides like meditation, like in that terms. Because I was like, because every time my parents, like my sister, my mom will always like convince me to do something with like in terms of spirituality. I'm like, this is so boring. Like, why am I supposed to do this? But then like during the pandemic, my anxiety got so bad that like I literally just like I started meditating and then I was like, I can't get away from this. Like I this is like too good. Like this is like I don't know why I never started this before. Like I don't know what I was thinking.
I love that. And you're what? You're not even 18 and you're like basically saying how amazing meditation is. I mean, that's awesome. You know what I was doing when I was your age? I was probably playing like PlayStation 2 games and, you know, being silly and not, you know what I mean? Like, I think that's so
Mm.
amazing. And I think this is definitely showing us that, like, the new generation, you guys are so much more awake than even me. I'm a millennial. And, I just think it's incredible. Like, doing meditation at that age. Yeah, hats off, kudos.
Thank you so much. I know it's definitely hard. Like I was never like into that things. Like it was hard for me to get started at first in terms of meditation because I was like, how am I supposed to sit down for about 25 minutes and just don't think anything at all? That's honestly the most boring thing I ever heard in my life, not to think anything. But as time go on, like when you do it more, you're like, oh, I'm a pro. Like this is the best thing ever. Because if you do it more and you'll get better at it.
For sure. Totally, totally, totally.
Like, how do you like getting into spiritual stuff like kind of like help you as a person during that difficult time?
I mean, just there's no words to say like how impactful being connected spiritually and believing that there's something outside of ourselves, whether that's God, source, energy, whatever you want to call it, that we're not just these like beings on this planet with no purpose, has been monumental in my growth. I mean, last year, my dad died in June, and then one of my really close friends died in October. And then in January, I got hit by a pickup truck on the motorway in Thailand. So I had quite a lot of stuff happen to me in a very short period of time. And honestly, the only reason I was able to like move through it all with a smile on my face, and of course it's hard when you lose your father and when you and all those kind of things and your friend, but you also know that there's more to it, right? It's not
Mhm.
like the soul continues to move forwards. It's just the physical experience that no longer exists, right? And so
Mhm.
for me, my spirituality has like supported me so much throughout my life, because it's just it is why I'm so strong and so resilient. Um, yeah.
Yeah, because like you never know like how much like something so impactful for you until like you try it. Because like when you lose a loved one, like I remember losing my grandmother a couple years ago and I was heartbroken. I was a mess and like it was just honestly very hard to go through and I'm still not okay to this day. I'm so upset about it. I'm so grieving. But like no one really gets over the loss of their loved one. Like even though they might be um getting better over the time that goes on, the grief really never leaves you. And basically, every time that you kind of think about it, like, oh, did this actually happen? Like, I can't believe I can see it anymore. But then, like, when you dive into those type of things, like spirituality, yoga, meditation, like, it'll kind of like relax you in some way, be like, okay, well, this is not my fault. Like this things happen. This is a part of life. Like you just kind of have to push yourself and get through it. Because I know every person is different in terms of processing grief and how to get through it. I know I was 11 years old when this thing happened, but then at that time, like I knew what it was. I knew kind of I was at that age where I was like, okay, well, I know what death means. I know what this means. I can't see it anymore. But at the time, like with meditation, like I wasn't introduced to meditation at that time. So I had like no kind of process in terms of kind of getting better. But that's what like, I kind of wish I had when I like at that time is I like, oh, I wish meditation, yoga, I was introduced to me at that time so I can kind of process it better. But things always happen, but like you'll always like get introduced to it later in life, Like it's just like it's better to be introduced to it than never be introduced to it at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I lost my grandma when I was 11 as well. But I had no, do you know what I mean? Like there was no understanding really because, well, society doesn't really prepare us for death either.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that people are afraid to talk about. It's something, and I think there's something you said about grief. And I think grief like time is a healer, and obviously as time goes by it's easier to deal with it, and of course we have these moments where we're going to feel sad or whatever, but actually in actual fact it's if we can learn to not be attached to the person, and know that the memories always live on, that connection is always there, but it's just not in a physical way anymore. The
Mm-hmm.
grief is a lot easier to deal with. It's actually the grief actually comes from the attachment, like wanting to bring them back, wanting to have
Yeah.
those like deep moments again or whatever. And yeah, for me, what really helped was just to be like, it's hard. Of course, it's easier said than done, but it's just being able to be like, okay, you know, the spirit lives on, the physical body's gone. Like I literally was with my dad when he died. Like I saw him, I held his body. Um, and it was such a a huge moment for me because one, I'd never been so close to death before. And two, I realized, oh, he's just like a body. Do you know what I mean? Like he's
Mhm.
not actually there. He's not really, you know what I mean? Like the soul's
Mhm.
not there. And then that actually makes it a lot easier for me personally, to have dealt with the grief. When you
Yeah,
realize, oh,
basically, like when you think about grief, like everyone processes grief differently, but when you think like, oh, like when you think about all these memories you have with that person, like that's you should keep that after they pass away because like of course you won't see their physical form ever again. They can still kind of see you grow as a person, even though you can't see them as a person or even see
yeah.
them ever again. And like you should think that because like of course you can't see them, but they can see you and what you're doing. Like that's actually probably the best part of it is that like even though you're not here on earth, you can still see you up in heaven or wherever kind of place you like to call it. I know everyone likes to call it a different place, but it's just like everyone like when you're doing a group, they're like, oh, they can't see me, my actions. I wish they were here, but they can in a way, you know.
Mm. Yeah, and I mean when you attune yourself to it, you can see them, or you can hear them, or you can feel their presence, you know? Like it's we all have that ability as well, but you have to believe it and you have to be open-minded to it. Yeah.
Exactly. And like a couple of years ago, you were dealing with self-esteem issues and all of these things. Like, how did you kind of remember like how much you were loved and kind of building like your self-esteem during that time?
Yeah, so I think, we all have self-esteem issues, and,
Mhm.
I've worked with like hundreds and hundreds of clients, and one of the main things that we always work on is self-worth. Because self-worth is like key to it's the keys to the kingdom, basically, if we were to
Mhm.
use that kind of expression. Like if you want to live, the idea of heaven and hell, it's all from my perspective is within ourselves. So you can create hell
Mhm.
on earth, you can create heaven on earth, but it's your choice.
Yeah.
And when you work on your self-worth and your that kind of part of you, you can start to really open your mind to creating a beautiful reality. And so for me, it was a journey, right? It's a lot
Mhm.
of the work that I do, which is a lot of energetic releasing belief systems, but it's also a lot about going back to the inner child and looking at different programs, maybe your father was absent, and then kind of helping the inner child understand that it's not because of the little boy that the father was absent, but because of the adult, you know what I mean? And so it's about kind of
Mhm.
deconditioning that, because a lot of our self-worth issues come from our conditioning when we're growing up, right? So we've
Mhm.
got unconditional love, and then we have conditional love. And unfortunately, most of us will have received some form of conditional love just because that's what our parents received as well. But then
Mhm.
when we receive conditional love as kids, we then start to put conditions on our experience, and we start to say, oh, okay, well, I can only be loved if I get good grades at school, or I can only be loved if da 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 da. And so I essentially went on a journey to just unravel all of that and realize that it's all lies. Like none of that is the truth, right? But we make it as our truth. And then when you start to unpick it and start to be like, okay, well, what's my new truth? What's the reality? And the reality is that when you were born, you were this little baby that was so innocent, so full of love, so worthy. Not one moment did anyone look at you and think, oh God, you're so unworthy. And not one moment did you, as the baby, think, I'm so unworthy. The only
Mhm.
reason that you started to lose touch with that was because you attached yourself to the conditioning that you grew up with, which is totally normal, because that's the only way you were going to keep safe, and the way you were going to feel like you could belong and survive. But the truth is, you are worthy. You have always been worthy, and nothing can ever take your worth away. No matter what trauma you've been in, no matter what you've experienced, your worth is infinite and indestructible. And when you can really understand that from every aspect fiber of your body, then the self-worth issues just melt away.
Exactly. Like when you like growing up, I dealt with self-esteem issues. Like I was very shy, no confidence at all. Like I didn't do anything at all besides like watch my brother's baseball games, as we are talking about before. But like growing up, it was very kind of hard because I was kind of felt that I was in the presence of like my brother, and like he was getting more attention. I just kind of felt like I was a shadow of my brother, and what I just didn't feel seen. I didn't think like people realized I was there, even though I was, like it's just like that's kind of how I felt. And this is like it kind of lowered my self-esteem a little bit because like when that happened, this like I don't know how to explain it. It's like when you that happens, you're like, is it even worth doing things if this is how I'm being treated or how I feel?
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of
Mm-hmm.
damaged me because like even though that's happening, like you do not know what to do and like how to build your self-esteem, even though I do love my brother deeply and care about him so much and he deserves all the attention he deserves. But then at the same time, I'm like, what about me? Like, how can I do that for
Mm-hmm.
myself as well? Like, how can I build myself up and actually get the same way and same treatment as my brother is being treated at that moment?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, look, it's such a common thing for sibling rivalry. It's actually comes from the survival of the fittest, right? It's this
Mhm.
kind of dog eat dog world. And it's just it's I had the exact same thing with my brother. He's incredibly intelligent, and I just was not very good at school. And I always felt like my dad like loved him more or cared about him more. But then when you get to the adult stage and you start to really look back at it, and you're like, you know, maybe it was the case, maybe it wasn't the case, but at the end of the day, like I don't need my mother and my father's love in order to feel worthy. I don't need,
Mhm.
to be, and I think, and of course it takes time to get to that place, but when we can start to stop comparing ourselves, because at the end, when we compare ourselves, it suggests that like it's kind of coming from a scarcity mindset, right? That there's only so
Mhm.
much that's available for everyone. So when you can start to disidentify yourself with that and just be like, actually, you know what? I'm a badass. I'm me. I'm exactly
Mhm.
how I'm meant to be. And you just own who you are. Then it doesn't really matter so much, like all that kind of stuff. But of course, growing up, especially when we're in our teenage years and even young adult years, like sibling stuff, it can become really intense, right? Because there's this
Mhm.
feeling of competition. And then whenever there's a competition, there's always going to be a winner and a loser. And then it can feel quite uncomfortable.
Yeah, it definitely can. Because like when you're growing up, you think like, oh, everything's a rivalry. Like you think like everything's a competition, but then like it's not competition. It's just competition like in your mind, in your headspace. Because you think like I need to win over my parents' love because my sister or brother is getting more attention to me because of this thing he's doing or she's doing. But then like you're like you have to think like, oh, my brother and my father probably get have more interest in me now. Like it's just like I do not need my parents' love or my siblings' love to actually feel worthy. Because of course we have different interests and different kind of ways we kind of want to grow up. But then like when we're older, we're probably gonna be like, why did I think that? Like why did I kind of have that mind space and stuff? But like that's kind of like how you just feel in the moment because like of course you want to have that rivalry against your sibling. That's kind of how sibling relationships, I know a lot of sibling relationships kind of like to be like that. I know I like to kind of win every single time. I'm very kind of competitive. But like if I am not competitive, I'm like, okay, well, what am I supposed to do to win over my brother? Like, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that makes sense.
But how did you kind of live up to your mission to release the limiting beliefs that are keeping you back?
How did I live up to that mission?
Yeah, like how did you kind of live up to that like in terms of limiting beliefs, like how did you kind of do that every single day and kind of push yourself?
Yeah, so we have to look at our limiting beliefs as they're just there as a way of keeping us safe, right? So, you know, if I have a belief I'm unworthy of receiving love, that belief is there because I don't feel safe in receiving love, because maybe when I received love, it was painful or it was taken away from me or whatever it may be. So when we start to look at our limiting beliefs, rather than from a perspective of anger and resentment, but rather from a perspective of, oh, okay, this is here because it wants to protect me, it wants to keep me safe, you already start to release some of the tension and the attachment. The main thing is, it's always to do with, like, if you focus on something over and over again, it's just going to persist, right? The resistance causes persistence. So if you resist the fact that you feel unworthy of love, you're going to feel more and more unworthy of love. But if you just accept, okay, I feel unworthy of love, but this isn't the truth. The truth is, I'm actually fully worthy of love, but I can't see it yet. And then you start to just look at, like, okay, so this belief system that I have, which is I'm unworthy of love, how does it serve me to have this belief? Like, why am I choosing to still hold on to this belief? And it might be, oh, well, because, believing I'm unworthy of love keeps me, as I said, safe. No one hurts me. It also allows me to keep people at a distance. It also allows me to play the victim, whatever it is, there's always going to be a kickback. And then you look at, like, what you're trying to learn, because we're always just trying to learn, right? Our growth, our soul's path is just towards evolution, is to growth. So if you have this limiting belief, your soul is trying to teach you something through this experience. And so when you start to, like, break it down and see it more from a logical mind perspective, you start to, like, be like, oh wait, actually, so this is, why do I have this belief in the first place? This is crazy. And so just by doing that, just by being a little bit more inquisitive rather than taking things at face value, and having more awareness, you can start to let go of your limiting beliefs. Then obviously, like with me, I then use, like, energy stuff and all the stuff that I've learned within my own practices. But just that in itself will start to shift things. You no longer become the experiencer of your life. You become the observer. You become like oh, this is interesting. Andrew is afraid of this. Oh, I wonder why, rather than being like, oh my God, like, this means so much about me.
Yeah. Because like not like I know like a lot of people kind of like show and like kind of like to threaten that person based off of what they're scared of. But on the inside on that person, like you're like how can I make this better? Because you do not know like why they're scared of that. Like something could have happened in their life personally that they did not talk about, and that's the reason, might be the reason why they are feeling that way or might be scared that day. Like you just kind of do not know like kind of what's going on behind the scenes. Instead of making fun of them for it, you should be like, is there anything I can do to actually kind of help you get over this challenge? I know it might be hard for you, and like, is this any way I can help you? And besides this being kind of dramatic about it and making fun of them for what they're feeling, because like you may never know how they're feeling on the inside. They might be feeling self-doubt about how they're feeling, and to know like if you have their support and everything, it will make you feel like much like better in terms of how you feel.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely.
And like how can like did your drug-induced experience kind of like awake you as a person, like back like when it happened for you a couple years ago? Like did it kind of awaken you?
I think it's because it threw me into a completely different reality, and so then I started really questioning what I was experiencing. And because the yes, it was when I was doing drugs that I was having these experiences, but then it happened, they were continuing when I wasn't on the drugs anymore. And so it was this kind of, I can only say, like, a forced awakening in some ways, because I started to um unpick reality, right? Started to notice lots of things that we maybe aren't aware of until we start to waken up or disconnect ourselves from the Matrix. And in that movie, The Matrix is a really interesting movie, minus like the fear-induced like machine stuff that we're all going to, we're plugged in on a spaceship somewhere or whatever. That's nonsense. But like definitely the idea of being like, this is a simulation of our soul, right? It's hard to explain what that means, but it's like every experience that we have, we're constantly communicating with the universe. And one of the things that I realized and experienced through the drug psychosis was that communication. Like I became
Mhm.
so heightened to the communication with the universe and started picking up on all of these different things and signs and experiences. So yeah, I'm so grateful for that. It was the most horrible, horrific time of my life, but now I can look back and say, hey, Andrew, you wouldn't be the person that you are today without it.
Right? Like you do not know kind of how to grow as a person until like something happens and it kind of wakes you as a person.
Totally.
In March of 2021, you started a business, and within a year and a half, you had six figures and changed many people's lives. Like, what topics do you kind of discuss with your clients to make change in their life?
So whenever I work with clients, it's always led by my clients. The main thing that I focus on is helping people become more authentic. And what does that mean? It means stepping more into their soul self, like removing their ego and moving more into the soul aspect of them. And so when they work with me, we look a lot at self-worth. We look at loads around relationships. So mother-father relationship, sibling relationship, because that's going to have a huge impact on them. And
Mm-hmm.
then it really depends. It all change. Every person's different, right? Sometimes it may be beliefs around money. Sometimes it may be beliefs around success. Sometimes it may be beliefs around relationships and what relationships mean. So it depends on who I'm working with.
Because like, what do you kind of see as most of your clients take? Like, do you think you more get kind of like authentic sessions rather than daughter type of sessions? Like, what do you kind of see more sessions as time goes on?
What do you mean by that? Sorry, can you just clarify the question?
Oh, sorry, but I kind of had a feeling I was going to say it, but like, what type of sessions do you see more often? Like, do you see more of a kind of like authentic more sessions more often, or do like is there any specific session you see more often than others?
Yeah, so I said before, definitely stuff around self-worth. That comes up so often, all the time, actually. But yeah, mainly people work with me because they want to be more authentic. So every session brings them back towards their authenticity.
That's amazing. Like, how can people get back to like their authentic self if they're struggling? Like, I know like a lot of people are like, how can I get back to it? But like, in case you are listening and going through that, like, how can people kind of bring themselves into the authentic self?
They just have to look at what's preventing them from being authentic, what are, and start to question if that's the truth. If that, if someone wants to be more gregarious and charismatic but they're very shy, um the fact that they want to be gregarious and charismatic means that that's a reality that's possible for them, otherwise they wouldn't have it in the first place. So they have to realize, oh, okay, so I have this feeling for a reason. I just need to now break through, work through my beliefs, my fears, my worries, so I can step into that new version of myself.
Amazing. Like, that seems like honestly like easy peasy type of thing to me, honestly. But I just want to thank you so much, Andrew, for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it. Like your story and mission is so inspiring. It has made an impact on my life and many others. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know your story will impact so many people. And thank you so much, everyone, for listening. And thank you, Andrew, again for coming on.
Thanks very much.
Of course. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.